Automation used to be simple. If this thing happened, just do the next thing, do that thing, right? This was pretty straightforward. There were entire businesses built around if this thing, then that thing. Relatively straightforward stuff. But enterprises are now flirting with something far more powerful. Artificial intelligence that can reason, plan, and take action inside the operating system of the business. The promise here is much greater efficiency and much greater productivity. But the risk is that autonomy becomes a polite word for uncontrolled behavior, especially when agents, agentic AI, touches customer data and mission-critical processes. The big idea here is that the future isn't AI everywhere. It's AI orchestrated, embedded inside controlled and governed workflows, with humans in the loop as necessary and data definitely kept private. 3 questions come to mind. What's the real difference between automation and agentic operations? Where should the guardrails live? And in Asia, what is the fastest path to experimentation to return on investment, ROI, without triggering like any chaos or agentic sprawl? We'll talk about agentic sprawl later as well. To explain all this and more, I'm joined by Raymond Ngan, Regional Vice President at Appian in Singapore and Asia. Raymond, thank you so much for coming and doing this today. How are you?
Good. Hi, Michael. I'm good. Well, interesting conversation and topic to have, right?
Yeah, very topical. I'd be curious to know if you follow actually some of the stuff that's going on globally with all of the back and forth. And I'll get to our topic in a moment, but I'm just curious if you follow the stuff that's going on with Anthropic and OpenAI and all the back and forth that's going on with them and this kind of little tit for tat that they're going through. Do you follow that at all?
Oh yeah, it's a jungle out there, man.
It does feel like a bit of a jungle out there between Dario Amodei and his sister, right? Who used to work at OpenAI.
Yeah.
And then started Anthropic. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you, but it is a jungle out there. Yeah.
No, that's true, right? Every large language model, all the AI stuff that goes through, and that's most important, right? What does that all mean now to us working in our daily lives, right?
Yeah.
So there's just too much of them out there. Well, I see the first thing you brought up. What does that all mean from automation to agentic?
Yeah.
In my view, well, it's just like you have a co-pilot, now it becomes an autopilot.
Yeah.
Right? It just strings through a lot of stuff that is there. It's no longer you ask AI or tool to do a task, but now it has agency to think, to put through what is right, and that's, in a way, quite worrisome.
Yeah, in a way. So can I ask you this, though? When people talk about agentic operations, right, what do you think they're getting wrong most often when they're talking about this? And whether that's technically or even organizationally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time it's more like if I have an agent that runs this agentic AI, I will just let it free flow, let it run well, right? And yep. That's where the trust question comes into play. They're just given too much autonomous to run things without a proper leash to actually train and ensure that you run small outcome first, right? So that's where I think in the past when agentic AI or even Copilot and the rest that came, it was a whole flurry of activities, right? Everyone started a little AI experiment.
Right.
And you know where that led, especially in the enterprise world, right? It's just have zero trust and it's starting to build a lot more. I'll probably say questions if the investment are right and is this remain a lab test or not?
Yeah, so this is the thing though, right? How do you explain to people when you go to these big institutions, these big like incumbent companies and say to them like, you should be switching from automation to orchestration. Like what's the cleanest way to explain to them this shift, right? Of you're not just automating stuff, but you're orchestrating stuff. And maybe for people that may not be so sure, how would you explain what orchestration means as well?
Yeah, I would take it as like you're a chef, right?
Go ahead.
And you're cooking your dishes and you're doing all the right things. You've got a lot of other sous chef that does the stuff. At the end of the day, you being the head chef, you have got to taste, look at the presentation and decide what's there before that dish gets out, right? Mm-hmm. So in a way, I'm looking at this and I keep telling my customers, prospective friends who are asking, what is this all about now, right? Just say if you've got 10 interns, how do you manage all your 10 interns and make sure they do the right thing, right? Day one, when an intern joined the organization, I'm not going to let him run around with my credit card, right?
I hope not. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah. So ultimately, that's really it, right? Small steps, test it right, and if that skill and that's trust built with proper guardrails and governance in place, then you probably launch that.
What? Here's the thing, though, right? How do you build that trust? And how much time does it normally take? And I also find it really interesting that you use, because I do this all the time. When I do shows by myself and I talk about, 10, having agentic AI, having 10 instances of this, I always use the analogy of an intern as well, right? Because it's like someone that's very smart. Obviously, you wouldn't have hired them. You wouldn't have brought them in to do something, but they don't know anything about your organization. So I just find that part actually kind of interesting. But how long do you think it takes, whether it's a human intern or even an agentic AI, how long do you think it takes to build enough trust so that you can actually really start using this stuff? Like, what's the point of no return here, where it goes from being just an experiment to being actually part of the real workflow?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on the use cases and the industry you're in, right?
Yeah.
If I'm in a highly regulated and mission critical, I guess it takes a lot more time, and investment is huge to ensure that that runs properly. And even then, there should be a fail-safe human in the loop, right? To ensure if everything and anything doesn't go well, that at least there's a person there to hit a button and, hey, override. Well, if I'm running small tasks, like, for example, processing claims, just ingesting documents that comes from different emails, written,
Right.
structured, unstructured, and have that all then summarized for a person to read and write. I think that's probably a shorter time frame, and it's more ring fence, right?
Yep.
To ensure that it is fail safe. So it really depends on where it is used. Well, in your sector, what do you do? Like, how have you been using the agentic AI? What do
How
you
have I
see?
been using it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I use agentic AI a lot for writing, right? But
Okay.
also for sending emails and processing and stuff like that. And what I found, though, is this idea of human in the loop is actually super important, right? Because a lot of the stuff that we do ends up not being internal but external facing. So if it's writing an email, if it's responding to an email and doing stuff like that, this idea for me of a human in the loop actually ends up being super important, because it's my reputation on the line, right? And this is kind of why I asked you about like trust, because while it does help me be way more productive and it helps us as a firm be way more productive, I still do feel like I want to check. And in the same way that you said, like, I wouldn't ever give my credit card to like day one intern, I wouldn't even give my credit card to my little sister, to be fair, right? Not on day one. But she has more money than I do, but that's a different story. But the point is that, like, when does it go from, like, I'm just trying to think, like, when am I going to have enough confidence where I'm thinking, you know what, I'm just going to let that email go out? Because over 1,000 emails that have been written in the last 2 months or whatever, all of them have seemed to have been okay. And the changes that we needed to make were minor. So why am I spending the time checking? Why am I not getting the full 100% productivity gain from this? And then you run this risk, and I'm curious what your perspective is on this as well, between using the human in the loop for safety or creating a little bit of, I don't know what you'd call it, bureaucratic drag. Do you know what I mean? Where things are slowing down so much that, like, now you're doing double work as opposed to being more productive.
Yeah. You're supposed to have an AI or some agent to help you, but you end up having to manage that even more and repeating, double checking and what's being done, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, tricky. Now, I think it's all down to I think usually when I ask my clients, right, or anyone who's in view of running an AI experiment in a way, I'll ask this question: what's the outcome you're trying to get?
Yeah.
You're trying to achieve. If it's just pure automating, getting things done faster, there's no real serious implication it goes through, then let it go and let it run for a while, right? And obviously, start up with a small set of pilot, and that's where you contain the outcome. And to a point when you're really comfortable, right? And I guess the question is when, and that's probably when you see that has become a norm that runs the so-called SOP, the standard operating procedure that runs along with it, let it go, right?
Yeah.
if the implication that error or that mistake is much larger, I guess that's when you can't let it run freely all the time, right? The point when we spoke of the trust, right, is built only when I have an exception that's put in place to ensure that if things goes wrong, I tap on it and the human jumps in. And as that goes on a broader scale and become lesser, then it's time to let go.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you start to feel comfortable, right? I guess it's fine. I love to make analogies here. If you don't mind, I'm going to throw one at you and you tell me if you think it makes sense. No one goes cliff diving. Do you know what I mean? No one jumps off a cliff in Hawaii or in Puerto Rico, wherever people actually do cliff diving, without jumping off a 1 meter board first. Do you know what I mean? They jump off that, they start to feel comfortable. Then they go up to maybe a 5 meter board, then a 10 meter board. Then they start feeling super comfy and they're like, okay, I know how to dive. And I'm not afraid of all this stuff. And maybe the impact off of a cliff is different than it is off a 10 meter board, but even 10 is still pretty high. Do you feel like it's the same thing here? That you just have to go in little bits and pieces and get used to it. And to be fair, when I was at Goldman Sachs, we used to do this, right? So we built an entire business around automated trading, so algorithmic trading. And in some ways, this was agentic AI maybe, but it was still like somebody that was a piece of technology that was doing my job, and I was watching it. Before we had that, I had to do it all manually, right? But we did the same thing. We would test on the weekends against the exchange, and then we would also test with our smallest, most trusted clients. Yep. Because if something went wrong there, the implications were tiny, right? And they knew we were testing with them. We didn't, tell them that this is perfect. We just said there may be mistakes here. But as we got more and more comfortable, and you're right, it was different for every algo that we ran, then we would roll it out to our biggest clients. But we never stopped watching either, right?
Yeah.
Because this brings up another question for me. So first of all, one, do you think that analogy with the diving makes sense where you just go a little bit higher every time?
It does. It's a crawl, walk, and run, right?
Yeah, fair enough. I understand it's simpler like that. That's why you're way better at this than I am.
Yeah. So that says exactly it. It's a funny thing, right? It's not technically whether a algorithm works. Most of the time it does when you put in enough work to ensure that it's being trained and it's being watched, and you have got different procedures to put in, make sure it's there. And I think many times it's more to the expectation that's being set, and especially how we deploy them. You cited a very good example. Pilot it. Start off with something small where mistake made is not that expensive.
Yeah.
And then build it broader, right? Sometimes it all depends on appetite of the organization who runs this. That's also the point where it's a two-edged sword, right? Many a times organizations run projects like that and just cap it within the test and development and never get productized for the fear of that not being accurate.
Yeah.
So where do we strike the balance, right?
So how do you, when you're talking to your customers, so like, how do you strike that balance with them? Right? Because what you don't want to have happen, I think, is you have the potential for huge productivity and huge efficiency gains, right? But if you're always off to the side, like testing, you're like, we're not there yet, we're not there yet, we're not there yet. And again, we did this in the algo space too. My boss was pretty aggressive. Our team was actually pretty aggressive. We're like, this is close enough, right? And if we don't roll it out now, then we'll never find out what the real problems are, right? Because in a test environment, it's very different than a live environment, particularly when you're talking about trading, because things happen in the stock market that you couldn't anticipate, but also things happen in the real world that you couldn't anticipate either. How do you, like, what's the conversation like when you're talking to your potential clients or your clients and you say, you need to stop testing this thing, you need to roll it out and just pay really close attention to it?
Yeah, you can only do that when you have planned really well, right? It's all down to the guardrails. If you have put up sufficient guardrails and you're pretty sure where when it hits some boundaries and it allows you to intercept, and you try that out a couple of times and you're pretty sure that guardrails work, it's ready to grow.
Yeah,
I think that's exactly what we need to put for. Else then it will always stay in the play area, right? It doesn't get out.
Yeah. If it stays in the test bed, it's never going to get rolled out into production. This is what we found all the time. I mean, I can remember a very specific time actually where we were rolling out a piece of technology, and on Saturday it literally was not working. and I had to roll it back. I literally did. I had to roll it back. Nobody was happy about this, but there was no way I was going to let it go out knowing that it wasn't working. Yeah, you're shaking your head. So you've seen this before, right?
Plenty of times, man. When you test, it's different, and most of the time when this happened, you can never replicate what went wrong.
Exactly.
So it just happened, and I guess in all projects and any cut over go live production that we be planning for, there will be this little thing that we need to ensure that if it doesn't get through, the organization and the client, right, has expectation that I'd rather keep this within than to let it blow and go run wild.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you this about orchestration. We talked about it a little bit before, but where does the orchestration layer live? Do you know what I mean? Does it live in the model? Does it live in the process? Does it live in the person? Because again, automation and orchestration are two completely different things, right? You're right. It's almost like being the manager of all this stuff, whereas automation is the actual process that's happening. But where does that orchestration layer live if it's not with the person itself?
Yeah, you could look at the entire organization, right?
Go ahead.
The individual, the department, or that function, it's only running within the silo. So I'd rather look at this as a domain that cut across the entire organization. For example, if you look at a certain process in order to cash, right?
Yep.
That alone is a segment of joint processes that pull together to form one streamline of tasks that's in place. And you have multiple of this procure to pay, order to cash, and that runs. So where does it really sit? I believe when an organization look at it, if I'm acting as a COO, I want to make sure that all these processes I have in place is being streamlined, being mapped. So it's a model, right? If I look at an organization and I've got a flywheel of processes that all put together and it runs, I want to ensure that each touch point is being synchronized and being looked upon very at a high level and ensure that it's connected at different points.
Have we gotten to a point where, and let me give you some context, right? So this question is actually going to make some sense, but you triggered something in my head, and I want to make sure I understand this properly. When I first started sitting on a trading desk at Morgan Stanley and at Goldman Sachs, the guys and gals that were trading had no technical background, zero. They didn't need it. They just needed to understand how markets worked and basically like how their PC worked, to be fair, and how a calculator worked. But the more technological stuff that got rolled out, the more that the business became technologically oriented, which again is what's happening right now with AI, agentic AI, generative AI, and all these spaces, right, in these big institutions. One of the things that we started doing was we started hiring mathematicians and computer science majors because they needed the technical expertise just to be able to do their job now. Right. There was so much tech there. Are you seeing a similar thing? Like, you mentioned this idea that the COO needs to know this thing. But if I go back a generation, a typical chief operating officer wouldn't understand like what agentic AI is at any level. But are you seeing a switch now when you go into these companies to start to talk to people that they actually have a tech background, if you know what I mean? And not like a deep tech background, but that they're so steeped in it that they understand this stuff better than they might have a generation ago.
Yeah, I think most of them grow up with a little bit of the internet era, if not the AI era that comes through the social media and all that comes. Yeah. You hit it right? I think being a manager these days is no longer just managing humans.
Yeah, for sure.
The humans are managing the AI, and you're looking at the teammates. How best do they actually leverage on what is there? AI tools, agentic AI stuff that's provided by the organization and for them to run with. It's an augmentation in a way, right?
Yep.
So I suppose what's going to change now is really how do we coach not just teammates and team members to do the work, but also coaching the systems, right? In this case, systems means that automation, agentic AI tool that comes in, process is layered out. And at any point in time, we know where the human is, but going to ensure that this systems that run your entire process, right, has got I'll probably say you develop it once, you automate, but you have to optimize it. So the optimization piece is when it's always a closed loop, right? It's ongoing. And you're taking data points from each of these processes to ensure that you optimize it over time. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that more and more work is getting out of humans, right? What it simply means is, really, how can I eradicate or replace mundane, dull work or task? For
Yeah.
example, if I'm just collecting information, typing it in, or reading information to prepare synopsis and what we do in Gen AI kind of work, that's probably all gone. But I'll still need, instead of 10 team members, human that's working on it, I'll probably have 4. Because what they're going to do is they're going to do more of this ingestion and then validate, read, and take on the exceptions that's being passed through from the AI tools, right? And
Yep.
you approves them. And this is where the coaching, the system comes through, right? The
Yep.
humans in the loop are the coach that coaches the system, in this case, the AIs.
There's so many things I want to follow up with you on there, but I want to tell you a story as well, if you don't mind, right? Because there's always this gigantic fear when new technology gets introduced, particularly productivity technology. And I'm going to exaggerate a little bit just to make the point, right?
Yeah.
That everyone's going to get fired, right? Because these new AI tools are just going to replace humans and there are going to be no more people. It's just going to be a bunch of robots executing a bunch of stuff. But I want to give a real life example. And I want to keep giving this example so people can understand that at every stage of every sort of technology cycle, whether it was the original invention of electricity, to be fair, right? Or anything along the way, even up until agentic AI, that people didn't lose their jobs in a way that everyone expected. They just did different things or they did more. And I want to give you an example, and then I'll get back to some of the other questions, but just so people can get a sense. When I joined the portfolio trading desk at Goldman Sachs, I think we were doing like $200 or $300 million a day of business. But once we automated a bunch of processes, to be fair, nobody got fired. I mean, unless they were bad at their job. We actually hired a couple of other people because what we ended up doing was the automation allowed us to go from $200 to $300 million of business a day to $3.5 to $5 billion of business a day. We had way more to do and way more stuff to pay attention to, and we made way more money.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like I understand that people may lose their jobs. That's fair. And I don't want to talk about that so much, but the idea is that it makes you so much more productive, but it also allows you to do so much more business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, that's exactly the point where I see that through evolution, right? When we have horse carriage.
Same. Go ahead. I love it.
You have got folks that pulls, and you have got folks that manage the whole ranch and all. When car came and you just have a driver and you drive the car, you lose all these other folks who's helping to pull the prepare the horse carriage and run that. And it just get more. Till today with Waymo, you don't even have a single driver in there. But what you have is tons of engineers managing the entire system, ensuring that safety protocols and all in place, right? You just don't see them. And when that happens, what works better is that as consumers, right, we always ask for more. And when we ask for more, there's demand for humans to do more with system augmentation, right? With AI augmentation.
Right.
So I guess that's what's happening, right? Throughout history, in the evolution of things, right?
I love
we keep fulfilling.
And you use my favorite example. I always use the horse and buggy to car example, and into automated cars. And you're so right, because there were guys and gals making like horseshoes and saddles and ropes and all this other stuff, right? And whips and stuff. And those people actually went and then worked on a production line for cars. They lost their one job, but they got a better job, which was higher paying. And you're right. People didn't see them anymore because they were no longer on the street. They were manufacturing things. Anyway, I'm very confident about this. And things move so much faster here. But I want to go back to one of the other things you were talking about, right? This coaching of the system. Because one of the things that I found was, even if I let an algo run, I was still responsible for it, right? So where does the liability lay? And like, where do you see this? So again, when you go and talk to your clients and your customers, what are they thinking about when they think about the liability around, okay, that process is now running automatically, but there is a human in the loop. If something goes awry, and every now and then it will, where does the responsibility lie? Is it with the guy or the gal that's doing the managing, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. the process owner, right?
Yeah.
So the head of the business or the head of that process that reports up to the business. At the end of the day, is someone delivering that service. In this particular case, it's either you have 10 men working or you have got 4 but leverage on AI. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, it's still that head of business and the process owner who's in charge, ensuring that this runs well and it's managed. The risk is being managed.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are always going to be responsible, no matter what the agentic AI is doing, and no matter what the generative AI is doing. Again, I use generative AI every single day, and I'm responsible for the images that it generates, like every day. And I'm like, I can't publish that. That's not what I'm going to do. I need to change that and do something else. You mentioned optimization. In the idea of the coaching of the system through human intervention and optimization, is there a place? And again, this is a little bit meta at some level, but I'm curious. Is there AI involved in optimizing the process that AI is doing with coaching from the humans, right? Because it can do it faster, I'm presuming, or more productively. But do you see that as well?
Yeah, there is. But what we measure is probably more on the results, right?
Go ahead.
For example, if I'm able to now shorten the cycle of getting things, it's not just how fast a particular process is run, but if I do at times innovate and skip some steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's through technology. Probably there's some advancement in technology that totally disrupt, and you don't need that 2-3 steps anymore. Well, the end result is that you get a product launch or a customer service done faster and more efficient, right?
Got it.
So the optimization here is really on what that means to the business at the end, rather than looking into the minute how fast does this particular cycle run in the systems, right? So I take optimization as not just on a system front, but really across the entire value chain.
Fair
so
enough.
If I've got a process that runs, say for example, in the past, you need someone to fill up a form, right? When you apply for loans, right? And if these days I'm on a mobile device, as a lot of these digital banks runs them, you click and you authenticate, it connects to a site, it has all your information, it passed through a AI tool that basically run and assess your credit. And within the next probably less than 5-10 minutes, your loan is approved, right? Mm-hmm. As compared to the past when you have got a paper and someone will look at it, stamp it, goes through the whole thing for half a month. It's different, right? Optimized to a way where I think innovation comes into play, and what technology has today has changed the whole level playing field.
Completely. Like, in a way, don't you think that it gives, I didn't intend to talk about this at all, but don't you think in some ways, like, it democratizes the access to all this technology, and it allows even smaller firms to compete with bigger firms because they can be just as productive, and the costs are no longer prohibitive as well, if that makes sense, right? So like a small firm using high-powered artificial intelligence and agentic AI can at some level accomplish what a big institution can as well, right? And if they can convince people that they're trustable or trusted, it really does level the playing field, no?
It is, and they basically disrupt the entire industry in some ways, right?
Yeah,
and
I think
that's
so.
Where as consumers then we kind of like look at it, they say, hey, this is totally new, I prefer this, it's giving me so much more value. Why not? And what happens then is that when you have 2 or 3 of these disruptors comes together, and they start to innovate again, right? And when that happens, you just increase the value that is being provided to the consumers.
Yeah, I completely agree. Go ahead.
Looking at all the super apps that came through, right? From ride-hailing to e-commerce to fintech, and God knows what else they're going to be, right? One day you have your insurance and your healthcare and everything that's tapped into it, right? The moment you wake up, you look at it, it probably advises and tells you next what should you be doing and what should you not be doing, right? Suggestions,
Yeah, but again, I want to get back to this. Okay, so people can understand. I want to get back to this idea of using agentic AI and also generative AI in a way that like you hadn't considered before. Like I literally do so much other work that I would not have been able to do just like 6 or 8 months ago, because I
Yeah.
figured out a way to use these tools in a way that like I was already doing that kind of work, but poorly. Right. And now I have this ability to take the ideas that I have, which I will say without any irony are pretty good, but the AI is way better at executing it than I could ever do by myself. But the leverage there is gigantic. I want to know this too, though. When we were building the algorithms for trading, and you'll see where this comes into play as well, right? Because everybody's not doing algorithmic trading. We wanted to make sure we knew what the algo was doing, right? So at some level, we were able to audit it because we built it in a way that made it easy for us to understand, okay, when it sees this market signal, it's going to do this thing. And we kind of knew that. And if it didn't do it, it was a problem, right? Because we're like, wait a second, it should have done that thing. How important is this idea of being able to audit stuff, right, play out in this agentic AI future that we're going to live in?
Very. The whole explainable AI thing that came through, well, just the fact that it has the transparency to show you how it thinks, what are the data points that is being used to consider, and how it runs it.
Right.
It's so much more in it that allows you to now be able to trust that more, right? So auditing it, I think it's definitely important, and it's the governance or the guardrail that I spoke of earlier, right? But auditing it means that it's just an action in the past, right? Basically, it's no longer you go back a point in time to find out why this went wrong, right?
Yep.
Now, what we're trying to do these days is that you want to make sure that when a transaction or process is in the fly, you want to make sure that if there's any risk that's going to come through, you actually intercept and stop it there and then, right? So that's where the explainable AI piece comes through. Audit is important, but you want to make sure that when you look through the logarithm that runs and the consideration that goes through, it's proper, and you actually see it going and running on real time when it happens.
Yeah. And look, this gets back to the intern analogy that we were making earlier when we first started talking. I want to be able to ask the intern, okay, I see what you did. I see what the outcome is, but why did you do it that way? If for no other reason, again, than to iterate and optimize and to learn, like, okay, if that's the better way to do it, then let's tell everybody that that's the better way to do it.
Correct.
But I do want to know what it is, right? I don't want them operating in the dark somewhere and then coming and going, here's your pizza. Like, I just want to know how all that stuff's getting made, if that's fair.
Yeah. What gets into the pizza, especially. Yeah.
Exactly. I want to know what I'm eating. But again, I do want to know from a business perspective what I'm ingesting, right? And that's actually more important.
Well, that's another big point, right?
Go ahead.
Data. Well, in any projects, we have seen organization when they put it into a more AI lab or experimental, one area that's really important when they push it through production and they fail is because they underestimated the amount of data that's needed to run it in production.
Got it.
So it's really important for organization to have this thought through, right? Well, we first started by saying, what do we want to run an AI on, right? It always anchors on, if I get this successfully done, it all goes back to an ROI, right? Is this worth doing it? Well, as AI run, that's cost involved. When it runs it within the lab, it's pretty small because the token that you consume is not that much. But the moment you put it into production and you want to scale, the whole economics will probably go out of whack. So what is important now is that before we even start, we got to decide whether from ROI perspective, from economic perspective, does this all make sense, right? To AI. And after that's being done, we then want to look at what are the key measures to ensure that it is successfully trial, tested, deployed to a point that we have enough confidence and trust and say, let it go into production, let it go, right? And run and scale. And that's exactly during this whole cycle of identifying, developing, and finally automating, we got to ensure that all the necessary data is there to run the full scale.
Can we talk a little bit about data a little bit more, if you don't mind? I feel like I feel like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I can't remember exactly when it was. There was all this conversation about big data, data lakes, data management, all this kind of stuff, right? It became this really important thing. And I think part of it was that because a lot of businesses were going through what we called digital transformation back then, if everything was going to be digitized, they kind of had to make sure that the data that they were basing all of this digital transformation on was actually good and valid and clean, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel like I hear as much discussion about that today, but like there's massive data center growth going on right now, not just globally, but specifically like in Asia and in Southeast Asia in particular. Huge businesses are getting built on this. How important is data management in the context of agentic AI and any kind of sort of automation using artificial intelligence?
Huge, because that's a single most important point in any AI project. And I've seen times when an organization starts and they have not had this whole data requirement thought through.
Yeah.
Right. You get into serious trouble, because then again, what was put through as an inception to a project will not cater for the needs of them going production.
Yeah.
So on its own, the data piece is an exercise, huge. That's the reason why a lot of companies have started building data lakes, right? Having pools of data being built into it. But if you look at it, right, there's no end to what's required.
No, none. None.
Yeah, none. Because that alone will be a showstopper, right? How am I able to prepare to know what is necessary, what's enough? And that's where the design comes through, right? You're going to make sure that at the very least, if you know where this data sits, I don't want, in the past, an organization that runs data warehouse and a lot more, they replicate, right?
Yeah.
They take data in, data out, and you will see many a times when they do that, you have multiple versions of data and they do not know, in terms of relevance and timeliness, which set of this data is viable.
Yeah.
So in our view, that now, if you're going to run this, you need to really be able to tap in and have a virtualized layer of information that's when you need it fast, and it's just there without doing the old way of replicating and building on the top. So we look at it as building a virtual layer of fabric that links. If I want a customer domain, right, I may have applications sitting for the past 30, 40 years, collecting a snapshot of some details of the data.
Yep.
I may have some set of information that's coming through mobile and some from third party. Right. How do I weave it now together to have a fabric of this data that is good enough to run, right? And that's it. Yeah.
So this is the other big question, right? You're right. A lot of these companies are running hugely hybrid tech stacks, right? In other words, some of it's super modern. Some of it, you're right, is running on like the fastest, smartest, newest mobile phone. But in other cases, it's running on like some old IBM Unix server somewhere. Do you know what I mean? It's really old, or maybe on a mainframe somewhere. Yeah. And you're right. Some of it is outsourced. Some of it's in-house. All this kind of stuff. Does the onset of the usage of agentic AI and artificial intelligence at scale, just because it takes so much compute, so much throughput, and so much sort of data control, as we were just talking about, right, in data management, does it also, what's the right word, encourage or almost force companies to change some of those data stacks? You said this, like some of the stuff they're running could be 30 or 40 years old, grabbing little bits and pieces of data. Are they now incentivized to say, okay, maybe we've been running this for too long. If this piece is modern, maybe this piece needs to get modernized as well, so that everything can be way more efficient. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So there's one way of doing it, and that's the most expensive way of changing and boiling the ocean to just get that right. So what we see, another approach is this: if I have that old stack sitting there for a long time, and I'm keeping it because I don't know if I were to remove this from what happens? But you don't know what happens next, right? So we'll probably now have a wrapper, a layer of agility that's built on it. So what that now means is that I'll look at what do I need to run this domain or this process, right? Yeah. If at all I can use anything from here, I'll use it. Else I'll leave it there on its own and extract the relevant ones. And the rest that I need, the data that is not found and unsure, I will have to find it from elsewhere, or I will collect and build it, right?
Yeah.
When it is fit to use, I will just use it then. Now,
Go
having
ahead.
said that, right,
Yep.
there are still times where interim requirements, right,
Yeah.
that you need to weave in just for that point in time when you're testing an AI application. Yeah. Over time, when you start building that and you know this has now become a mainstream set of information or application that I need, and that stays put, and you start building and modernizing on this new nucleus.
So I used to say, and again, I've been involved in business for God, a long time, 35 years, right? And maybe even slightly longer, but don't tell anybody. But I remember when we started rolling out really advanced technology. Well, when we started networking the London office to the Tokyo office, which back then seemed like it was magic. And when we started in little bits and pieces, I just kept remember thinking, oh my God, we're going to take the PCs off everybody's desk and we're going to install Sun Spark stations that are connected not just here, but all over the world. And I remember thinking there's probably no better time to have been a technologist because stuff was so exciting and so interesting.
Yeah.
But I feel like that never stops either. Sorry, I interrupted you. But you understand the point. Today, the tech that we use is so powerful, but it's also kind of fun and exciting to be involved in using it every single day. No?
It is. It is. I mean, it's new. It is fun and it helps, right? So we'll always lean into it and who knows, right? And applications that comes through. I remember back in those days before iPhone came, right? Or the smartphone, right? You have the old BlackBerry and the old Nokia banana phone, or the flip and all that.
I remember them all.
Right. when we start having new launches, we are like, oh, what is this? What's next? And the moment it built on, and these days, the phone is the single most used device that is connecting and touching upon every single living and conscious daytime life of yours. So I look at it from the point of view where when we start off with any new application, new stuff that comes through, a lot of this will probably flow and just be written out and it's not useful. But a bit of it that stays, it will just stick on for a long time and it build upon more.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I did a whole, you just reminded me of something. I did a whole segment on my show yesterday, the day before, I can't remember, on 6G and stuff coming out of the Mobile World Congress. I'm still very interested in devices. And I want to come up with a new name for the phone because it's not even a phone anymore, is it? I was just thinking, I can't remember the last time I made a phone call on my phone. But again, it's a digression. But I understand the point that you're trying to make. It is involved in everything that we do. I don't know. Mobile computing device just sounds too lame to me. You know what I mean? It's not fun enough. Anyway, before I let you go, I'm not asking you to make a prediction, but if you do look forward, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, let's go really far out, right? Or maybe 3 or 4 years. I'll leave it up to you. What does a well-run agentic enterprise look like? Do you know what I mean? What am I striving for? What do I want it to be? And what's going to make not just me, but my clients, by definition, happy? What is that supposed to look like? And then I'll let you go.
Yeah. So I envision, I probably think it's going to be 5 years from now. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thought of running a process or even thinking of structuring one, it's no longer relevant. As in, what we need to do then is just to tell or to state or prompt, whatever that is, right? And say, this is the outcome I want. This is all I have, and let it run. And from enterprise point of view, and for businesses, there is enough orchestration to just provide you prompts and tell you these are option 1, 2, and 3. Which of this you pick, and you start building that. And in a couple of trial runs that you do, you will then have a process that is built out of AI, agentic AI, or whatnot that's going to be. And all you do then is just to measure your outcome. right? For example, if I plan to roll out a new product in this market in Southeast Asia, let's say start off with Indonesia.
Okay.
That's the largest. If I get it running, I can just replicate all across.
For
So
sure.
if I put through a plan and say, roll this out, these are your parameters, and propose a plan, run it. And the moment when I say good looks good, put that forward, and I've got an organization with all other AIs, or like I mentioned earlier, the procure to pay part that fulfill that, the production that runs it, and the order catch takes order. It's just fitting nicely and automatically tie this whole thing around and launch it to the market. And then we'll tweak it as we have. That's where the optimizing piece is. See how that provides the returns based on the goals I've set.
Yeah, so this is actually really interesting. And again, I said I would let you go, but just give me one more second on this, right? Because you made me think about something. Getting back to the intern analogy, right? I can go to my intern or all 10 of my interns and say, do this process or create this thing or write up this, summary for me. But at some point they are going to come back and say, okay, but do you want it this way, or that way? Right? And if agentic AI can actually replicate that, so you tell it to do something, it says, but wait a second, it's not clear to me yet. Because instead of guessing, right? I always say to my teammates, don't make me ask the next question, right? Because I don't want to have to, if you're not giving me enough information so that I can actually make a decision, don't make me ask the next question. Just give me all the stuff that you think I need to know so I have the right context. But it's like if I just tell ChatGPT, make me a thumbnail, it's going to have to ask me a bunch of questions.
Correct.
Right, so you want to give it as much detail and as much information as possible. But let's say you leave something out. You don't want it to just go off and do stuff without that missing piece of information. So it would be kind of cool if it does come back, just like an intern would, and say, wait a second, I don't feel like I have enough info. How about these 3 other things? Which one of those do you want me to do? And are you suggesting that that's going to be part of this idea of like what a well-run agentic enterprise looks like?
Yes, I think it's a lot of autonomy that's there. But at the same time, you're allowing a very important piece of this, right? You make the call, you drive the whole conversation around what you want to achieve, and it does the work and still allows you to provide inputs and option. And at any point in time when you see something is not right, then you pull the plug or you tweak it all over again. So you're going to start something new, right? Let me know. I think we can help you in Appian.
Exactly. Okay, good point. Raymond, I will let you go. Raymond Ngan, Regional Vice President at Appian Singapore and Asia. Thank you so much for coming and doing this today. I really appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I had a ton of fun.
Certainly I did. Thanks, Michael.